I'd like to introduce today's panellists first, starting from the left there on your right. Gregory Day is probably known to you as a local writer. He's a poet and a musician and a writer from Gowkaran Country. He's the winner of the Australian Literature Society Gold Medal, the Nature Conservancy Australia Nature Writing Prize, and the Patrick White Award for his ongoing contribution to Australian literature. He's also twice been shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award, most recently in 2024 for his novel The Belle of the World. And his latest poetry collection, Southsightedness, that we're going to speak about today, was published in April this year. Welcome, Gregory.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
And next to Gregory is Rhett Davis, who's the author of Arborescence, which has been described as a devastating and unforgettable elegy for the planet. His first novel, Hovering, won the Victorian Premier's Literary Award for an unpublished manuscript and was shortlisted for the Readings New Australian Fiction Prize and the Aurelius Award for Science Fiction. His work has appeared in The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, Kill Your Darlings and The Big Issue. Welcome today, Rhett.
Thanks, John.
And in the middle of the group today is Jayne Tuttle, who is a writer, performer and co-owner, as you probably know, of the bookshop in Queenscliff. She's the best-selling author of Paris or Die, My Sweet Guillotine, and the recently published The Sea in the Metro. Paris or Die was developed into a solo theatre show which toured Victoria and France from 2001 to 2023, including here at the local Word Writers Festival. Jayne's writing has appeared in The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian and other international publications. Welcome, Jayne.
Thanks.
And on my very left is Shokoofeh Azar, who is an Iranian-Australian author and journalist known for her evocative storytelling and poetic prose. She began her career as a journalist before fleeing her homeland of Iran in 2010 because of political persecution. Shokoofeh's debut novel, The Enlightenment of the Green Gage Tree, was shortlisted for the 2018 Stella Prize and the 2020 International Booker Prize. Her second novel, The Gowkaran Tree in the Middle of Our Kitchen, was published in June simultaneously in 6 countries. Welcome, Shokoofeh.
Thank you.
I'd also like to acknowledge the library's great support of local writers over the years, and that's why I think it's culminating really in this weekend of local writers and in today's session, in which we have writers representing several genres: magic realism, memoir, speculative fiction, and poetry, but which might seem very different, a different sort of approach, but I think we'll find as we go on there's lots of overlapping ideas and feelings between the writers that we sort of look at different and common themes, which is an advantage, I think, at times like this to be able to listen to writers express their ideas. I think you'll agree that we haven't had such difficult or confusing times as we have now, when the ideas of truth and reality are just very unsteady. When we thought there were facts and now we find there are other facts, and then we find there's fake news, it's all very confusing. And then we feel that perhaps our lives are being guided by algorithms. And then there's the worry about what AI is going to do, whether it's going to take us over completely. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to toss around some of these ideas that come from these writers today. And if we're talking about going back to the idea of the title of today's session, which is, as I said, the actual title, which I'll need to refer to get it right. Basically, it's about creating other worlds and realities through using imagination, storytelling, and memoir. So what are these worlds that these writers are presenting us with today? Perhaps that's the place to start. So I might start with you, Shokoofeh, if that's all right, to ask you, what's the world or reality that you're presenting to us in this, your latest book?
Yeah. So actually I write in magical realism style that most of people think that magic realism is more about writing about fiction, fictional stories, fairy tales, mixing with mythology or mixing with supernatural characters, which is partly correct. But the main idea of magic realism is that we can consider this style as a post-colonial style and also kind of literary resistance. So why I choose this style? Because I believe there are very valuable and deep culture in Iran that for 1400 years was attacked with or forced by Arabic culture and with Islam. So 1400 years we try to keep our culture. And then we had good moments and bad moments in the length of this history. But the worst one was the last 50 years when we experienced the Islamic Revolution in Iran. So Islam was attacked inside of our houses while we try to keep our Iranian culture. So what I'm doing usually is before writing, when I want to write my plot, it's more like I stand up looking at Iran from above to its length of history and see what made Iran Iran, what make us connection from now in modern life to our history. And I find the roots, I find the threads and focus on them and write about that through historical facts. And I combine all of these historical facts with what's going on inside Iran now in our contemporary life, and combine them with our folks, Iranian folks, mythology, and ancient beliefs and philosophy. So from this perspective, what I'm doing is just nothing but writing about truths, about our history. But I'm using our own culture, believing or ghosts, believing or supernatural activities, and mix them with what's going on inside Iran. And always there is a political heart inside of my novel. In this novel, The Gowkaran Tree, the political story is on base of a true story that we call it in Iran, the chain murderer by the regime. So the regime in last almost 50 years systematically killed our intellectuals. So this story is all about how our intellectuals always been victims of this regime. And sometimes I feel that my work is very similar to Persian carpet. When a Persian weaver, during weaving a carpet, lose some of her, usually they are women, her loved ones, they quietly insert a black thread middle of all of those colors and symbols and patterns to respect that memory of the loved ones. And I think I am doing the same in my novels, with full of patterns and culture and colors and dance and music. I insert that black line, which is actually to me is more like a respect of the loved ones and intellectuals that we lost in the length of history in the name of Islam. Yeah, so I do a lot about reality.
And it's that Persian mythology that's all the way through your book, or
Yes.
both your books, really,
Yes.
isn't it? I suppose I'm interested in why did you choose to write using so much Persian mythology when you could have written? There's many facts in your book and political facts about things.
Yeah.
Why not write as a journalistic sort of
Yeah.
approach and just? I mean, that would be enough in itself. So what does the mythology add to your books, do you think?
I was a journalist. For many years I worked as a journalist, and I always remember that I grew up with books. I read a lot since I was like 12 years old or something. And actually I started reading by mythology. My father bought lots of mythological books and I loved them. And so when I was working as a journalist, I always felt when I'm publishing my stories, there are some stories behind them that I like to write, but obviously I couldn't write because in journalism style, you are not allowed to write behind the scene, after the scene, sides of the scene. So I choose magic realism because it gave me the opportunity to do all of this. Iranian myths and Mesopotamian myths gave me the opportunity to actually write about collection of the memory, human collection of memories, what Iranians thought from thousands of years ago, and why they are valuable now in 21st century. This connection made me feel that there are still so many stories that I want to write about them. Yeah.
There's a lot more to talk about there too, Shokoofeh. We'd like to come back to that.
Sure.
But I might just sort of jump down the line a bit, and rather than going one after the other, like a school term, we'll jump to the other end to you, Greg. And your book of poetry, Southsightedness, what is it that you're bringing to us with these poems? What sort of world, what sort of reality are you offering to us here, do you think?
Well, I think I would preface what I say by saying, I think actually a lot of the time the author or the writer of something is almost the last person who can describe on top of the words that you've already put down.
It's an unfair question.
No, it's worth saying though, because we are at the centre of our own existence, and sometimes it's hard for us to step outside and look back and see exactly what we've done. So there's a certain kind of absurdity to talking about it. But having said that, I think what these poems, which were written over a period of 20 years, in the margins and in the background, and as you say, Shokoofeh, to the side and behind and in front of the novels I wrote during that period. And I feel like I've been thinking about it when asked questions like this. I think the word that I've landed on is eclectic. So lots of different things about the world we live in Australia. I think Australia, I've started to feel like eclectic says a lot about Australia, and it's so layered, complex, diverse, and my life is no different. So what this book does, it's very much ensconced in the landscape where I live, further down the coast from here, and it's very landscape-based. It's very much about a place and a landscape that I love, but it's also coming to that landscape from the point of view of the landscape being kind of under pressure. I've been through periods of time where I've been very depressed about climate change, particularly with children and so forth, and looking at that. And so there's a kind of heightened experience going on now with, if you want to call it nature, although we are part of that, nature and landscape, because we're in this situation where this normal kind of lyrical appreciation of nature is also intensified by the pressures that nature is under. So it's a very interesting time to be writing in what is an ancient landscape, and being like my family came in here from Ireland and Sicily like 180 years ago. That's very recent, and I'm writing in English, which isn't the language of that landscape traditionally. So it's complex and eclectic. So the attitudes in it are eclectic too. They're both political, personal, and imagistic, and there's a kind of yearning there to find a language to describe that complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like to come back to that question of language for yourself and probably for the other people on the panel too. But just before going to the others, you said that the poems were written over 20 years. So obviously you were writing your novels at the same time. So how did the novels and the poetry sort of fit together, or did one provoke the other, or what was the process there?
Well, I think probably I started writing poetry before I wrote novels, and I'm also a songwriter too, so that's all three are kind of entangled. But I think for anybody who's read those 6 novels I've written during that 20-year period, you'll see seeds germinating in these poems, literally kind of seeds in terms of elements and objects in the landscape, but also attitudes. So the poems just worked. You can write a poem in 10 minutes sometimes. There's poems in there that took me 15 years to finish, but there is a possibility that you can write a poem almost in a moment, whereas with a novel you can't. It's a very deliberate and ongoing kind of activity. So the poems are like, they were written as I wrote the poems, almost like annotations in the margins of the novels. Yeah, so covering the same themes, but doing it in a variety of different attitudes and not bound to character, more bound to me, my personal voice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Jumping ahead then a little bit, talking about what the books offer. Jayne, I'm just going to, talking about your book, this is the third book in the trilogy, isn't it? And I noticed when I took your first two books out of the library, one was under biography and the other was under memoir. So, but I sort of understand you're not quite happy even with the title of memoir. Does that tie it down too much? What is it that we should expect here in the pages of this book?
I feel really similarly like that feeling of trying to describe what the work is. I actually remember coming to the Geelong local word festival I guess it would be about 5 years ago, and I was desperate to find out what I was writing because I was just writing this story of my experience, but I wasn't sure if it was non-fiction or fiction, and so I thought this used to be the non-fiction festival, and they had this fantastic panel one day, and it was with 3 or 4 different writers, and Alice Pung was one of them. And at the end of the thing, they hadn't really answered the question that I had, which is, what is the difference? Please tell me. And I remember putting up my hand and saying, what if you don't know if what you're writing is fiction or non-fiction? And Alice said, that's not your job. Your job is to write the thing and let the others decide. And it really helped. And to this day, I still really... it probably stopped my writing for a long period of time because I was so obsessed with this idea, but is it a novel? Is it a memoir? Is it a biography? Is it... and my favourite books... I sort of look at those books and I think my favourite ones are the ones that don't quite fit into anything. They're true stories, but they've got these other aspects to them. And memoir is probably the closest thing that these books are because it's a word that I think holds within it. The idea, it's got a dreaminess to it. It's so it's like remembered, and we all know memory is flawed. It's me trying to... The 3 books are me trying to make sense out of this experience or these, this period of time in which I've had these 3 quite different goggles on, looking at the same street, living in the same city, and just following that feeling of curiosity where it's taken me. So I don't know what you... And yeah, it's funny, I went and signed some books this week and they were in the travel section, and I was like... I don't know if that's really advisable. I wouldn't be reading it if you, especially My Sweet Guillotine.
I think that's partly maybe in that section because one thing I noted with your book is amazing accuracy with the names of streets and bars and clubs. Like it was almost, telling people when you go to Paris, go there and then go down that street. And why that sort of accuracy then? How did you remember that sort of so far back?
Yeah, I guess that's my anchor. That I was very keen at the time that I was living these experiences to make notes and to be very precise. When it comes time to actually put all those notes together and actually build a narrative, build a book, I don't want to just... I don't think I'm particularly interesting. I don't want to just list... I'm not a famous person. You don't want to know, I went here and then I did this and then I did that. I'm trying to take you on a ride. So making that experience a book, telling a story, it requires a level of creation and creativity. So that is the sort of sinew between all of these moments of reality. So that's the actual colour and the smell and the taste and the place. But within that, then that's where it becomes a creative work, I suppose, rather than a journal or a autobiography.
And there's aspects about your language and style that we might come back to too. I think it's really interesting. But just passing on to you, Rhett, I think your book has been described as speculative fiction. I don't know if you're happy with that title. How much can we pin your book down to a certain style, or is it sort of a bit slippery like all these books seem to be now? They're not sort of behaving and sticking to a certain style. They're sort of going in all directions. How would you describe your own book to us?
I like books that misbehave, I think, a little bit. Like Jayne, I think, to me, that's exciting. Books that are a little bit hard to describe are kind of where my head's at, for sure. Ones that sort of take me by surprise, I guess. That you don't really know what you're getting when you get into it. I think that's where the magic is for me. Speculative fiction, yeah, my work is probably speculative fiction. I mean, people ask me what I kind of think of it as. I guess that's a genre as much as anything, or, I mean, you could say science fiction possibly a little bit as well. That's probably pushing it for me, because I think it's very much set in a contemporary sort of Australia, really, mostly, but some things are deeply messed up. That might be a little strange. And in the case of Arborescence, it's people turning into trees. So, I mean, trying to link a little bit of what the others have said, I sort of, from what Shokoofeh is sort of saying, I tend to sort of sidestep reality. Obviously not because of some oppressive regime, but I find reality as a writer quite difficult to really grapple with. And I kind of want to, my natural instinct is just to get away from it and shift it, to understand what I'm actually writing in the first place. So I'll start a book with a fairly, often quite an absurd premise, maybe even a little bit comedic, and I'll write to what that actually. I won't know why I'm doing that to some extent. I'll write to actually understand what I'm thinking, what the real depths of what I'm actually feeling are. And with Arborescence, it was a case of realising that I was writing about grief, and not really knowing that until I really actually probably finished a draft and went back and went, I actually got to correct all that. But yeah, and mine, it's also from Greg's point of view. I'm from Geelong, Surf Coast kind of region. That's deeply affecting kind of what I've written about, particularly in this book. Growing up down near Belbray, near Anglesea, and the Otways, that was very much the forests down there are very much kind of part of how I grew up, and that's all through this novel in particular. And unlike Jayne, I forget everything, so I don't know if I can connect with that
and
one.
yet they're so real, the way you write. It's so grounded in reality. Otherwise, we wouldn't go. Yeah. We wouldn't feel as connected.
It feels like I try and do that. I try and make it so that you're very much in that contemporary kind of world, that it feels like at the start nothing's wrong here. But yeah, it goes in different directions.
You really seem to try and grapple with what is a changing reality for us now. I mean, you very much sort of move into the effects of the digital revolution and, questions about how it's changing society and the direction we're going in. I think even your style, which it's sort of made up of it's quite fragmented in a lot of ways, the style, very short sentences and short paragraphs and people not sort of quite communicating, and there's that sort of, things are a bit sort of unsettled, aren't they? It seems like you're trying to examine the sort of world that perhaps we're moving into at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, as I've started talking about it, I've realised that probably one of the main questions I'm probably interrogating a little bit is how far we want to go in the technology versus nature sort of stakes. I mean, we've obviously gone very far away from who we really are and what we really are. And in this book in particular, I'm kind of interrogating that. It's almost an oppositional thing. The technology is getting a little bit out of control. AI is sort of only a few years probably beyond what it really is in real life, really. But it is a bit funny and absurd. But I suppose I'm definitely kind of trying to interrogate that idea that how far do we really want to go? Is this a point maybe where we could say, you know what? I mean, and maybe that's a cliche, but maybe we could just stop a little bit of this stuff. Do we really need, billionaires controlling AI, controlling our lives? Do we really need that?
Yeah.
I don't really think we do.
Yeah.
And look, that comes from someone who's worked in tech for a long time, and I have been an advocate for it, but I've started to push back against it a little bit, and that's what this book is kind of probably a bit of an expression of as well.
Can you say something a little bit more perhaps about the main premise of your book, which is, fits with the title, which is people becoming trees, which seems pretty outlandish, but can you just say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it starts with, a couple who are sort of just swanning about in their 20s, I suppose, and they come across a video online of people pretending to become trees or thinking they're becoming trees. So they're all standing in a field, all in a row, just standing there, thinking they're becoming trees. And is it performance art? Is it kind of some other kind of thing? Look, spoiler alert, some of them do become trees at some level. And that to me obviously is, and it's almost like I set myself that equation, that's what's going to happen, then I have to work out how the reality of that will work and what that really means. But that's effectively the journey we're on. There's a funny side to it as well as quite a serious kind of side to that. It's kind of a mournful sort of book in some ways too.
Yeah. And sort of just following on that question of style, because I think the style is really interesting. So you've deliberately really made it quite a fragmented sort of a book, and you've introduced a lot of digital sort of language, and that's sort of part of the story too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the books that I kind of read beforehand before writing Arborescence was Jenny Offal's Department of Speculation and Weather. Both of those are fantastic books, by the way. And they're very short, very fragmented books in a similar sort of style. They've got very short paragraphs that sort of jump from time to time. And they're magnificent. And they perform a whole sort of a life in a book that's about this big. And so that idea of the fragment in a book really appeals to me at the moment, and it appeals to my sense of attention, because I don't I find it very difficult to read long passages sometimes. So I've got to get better at that. But it's a bit indicative of the the life we're in a little bit. The only other thing, one last thing about that, which is really silly. I try to impress my dad with metaphors a bit, and I said to him the other day, "Look, Dad, the book, I'm going to blow your mind here. The book itself, all those little passages, they're leaves of a tree, and the book is the tree." I know it's a bit lame, but that's what I did.
And it's made of a tree.
So just pursuing that sort of idea of language and the language that you use. Perhaps can I come back to you, Greg, talking about language. You said, I think, a little while ago that perhaps English is not indigenous to the landscape that we live in now. And you seem to be really, not struggling is not the word, you're really trying to find a language that somehow puts us into that landscape or expresses what that landscape's about. You've done that sort of number of ways. You use a few botanical names of things and quite a few, occasionally Wadawurrung words that you feel, but then you've got a lot of combined words, which I found really interesting. Putting two words together that don't seem connected, but the overall result of two seemingly unconnected words is quite incredible. It really says something. So was that a deliberate thing to sort of try and come up with a different language that would express the landscape and your place in the landscape, or our place in the landscape?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know about deliberate, but it's necessary for me. Like, when I was young, I fell in love with James Joyce. So as I said before, my family are all pretty much Irish, and what James Joyce did with English, because English was the colonising language in Ireland of my ancestors as well as it has been here. So he took the colonisers' language and did what he liked with it, and inverted it, and undercut it, and extemporised on it, and that really appealed to me at the time. Partly because, like I was saying before, the eclecticism of it, but also the play, the music, the sound, and in the landscape where I live. It's so amazing. You just get daily kind of energy from it and thrills in it. So there is this thing about how do you match that with language? Sometimes, in my limited understanding of Wadawurrung, that happens sonically, say maybe in a word, just simply the word for magpie being a European bird, Padawong, if you say it like that. When you hear a group of children say that word in a group, they actually sound like a flock of those birds, yeah. So that stuff really strikes me as a writer using language. It's like, so how do I measure up? You know, how do I measure up in this English, this thing we call English? So one of the ways you do it is, well, I do it, is doing what happens a lot in German language, which is compound words. You bring two words and you put them together. I mean, the title of the book, Southsightedness, is I've never heard that word before. So it's a way of putting that and that together, turn it into a verb or a noun and go, maybe that captures the kind of hybrid that I am, or that my experience is a hybrid experience in language.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And if we can sort of continue that sort of discussion of, Jayne, of language and style, what's interesting about your story is that there's that theatrical background, and the style of your book is often sort of quite theatrical and dramatic. You've got sort of some parts of it read like a script, like a script for a play or a film or something. There's different points of view often in your, like different characters say different things, and is that sort of part, is that sort of how you would describe your style? What does that sort of do to the story, do you think, that theatrical background?
Yeah, I'm always trying to find ways. It's interesting, actually. I just realised how being not... so for so much of the experience of these books, I've had the sort of lack of confidence in language because I'm the person who doesn't know, who's trying to learn. So much of the books are about this sort of trying to find my personal power, I suppose, in some ways, in these situations. I'm not describing it very well, but I just realised that it's a very unformed thought. I definitely was always interested, and I think maybe that's a theatre thing, I'm not sure, but how to, place in scene, voice. So in Paris or Die, for example, everything is in direct quotes and the language is very separate. And then by the time we get to My Sweet Guillotine, there's a theatre, because of the trauma of the accident, there's this, it just made sense to me to put a lot of the descriptions and the interactions in performance, because she's performing herself so much and having to put herself in these different roles in order to move ahead. And then in the scene in the Metro, everything is just a blur. So the language, she's better at the language. She's actually immersed in the culture more. There's no quote marks. It's all a sort of sea of language in lots of ways. And I didn't seek to impose that on the books. It just felt right. You know, when you're sort of writing and it just felt weird to put quote marks around the sentences. They just felt imposed and formal in this way that she's not. She's a struggling mother in the streets and trying to sort of make her way ahead. So everything is on one level, and the language is much more embedded inside the mind of the person. So it all matches into one. There's no italics for the French either. It's just the French is mixed in with the English. And that just felt right. I didn't have any particular desire to show anything. It just felt like as soon as I did it like that, it felt right.
And just sort of following along that sort of idea, what I sort of found interesting was that my question was, which Jayne are you writing about when you write about that person? And did that person change over the three books? Were you writing about three different people?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that makes absolute sense to me, because as soon as I start to try to put down a story that is mine, I'm already fictional. I'm already turning her into a character. So, and also this story happened, you know, it happened over 15, 20 years ago. So the length of the story is, there's a distance that I have as I'm writing it. The Jayne sitting here now or sitting in her office this past year finishing the scene in the Metro is very different from this young woman who has just had a child and is trying to get ahead. I think maybe that helps me empathise with her and see what an idiot she is, and, you know, and just actually have that distance. I definitely don't see them, I often talk about them as Jayne. I don't see them as as an I, because I guess I don't really feel that. Yeah, they feel separate. If that makes any sense at all.
I think so.
Yeah.
I have to think about it.
It sounds a bit
longer.
crazy, like I've got multiple selves, but I definitely feel that when I'm writing. I'm writing about this particular self, and it's followed on in that way very naturally.
There is a sort of an idea of standing back at a distance and, passing some sort of judgment even on that person and those people that you're able to do at a distance that you certainly couldn't do at the time.
Yeah, I don't find myself interesting, but I find that person who is well left behind, she's in here somewhere, but
Yeah.
I find her really interesting to explore, and I can see her from a certain distance. So if I was trying to write about today, no. Actually, the moment you put it down, it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
The moment you look at it and start to try to describe it, there's already a distance.
And Shokoofeh, just what I found a really interesting part of your story and your approach by using mythology, also you have no problem with characters if they die. There's quite a few dead characters going around in there, isn't there? They live on. They're part of the story. They're still living. It doesn't matter whether the characters are alive or dead. They're very much part of the story. They're not gone at all. They're here, present, and they offer something to the story, don't they? I find that really interesting. Is that sort of part of Persian mythology, that
And
idea?
also all culture.
Yeah.
I think we are very nostalgic people. We love, past. Always we think about past. Grandma, grandpa, and old people, old house, old friends, old city. Before this regime, always we think about the past, and it goes to all of our culture. It's not just something that I created. So when I want to write about now, I cannot stop myself to think about past. Past exists inside of us and inside of our culture, inside of the way that we look at the world. And I remember when I was a child and I stepped into my father's study room, full of books, and then I started reading, and many of them be dead writers, dead philosophers, dead artists. And this idea came to me that we are living between them. And it's very, I think, it is stupid if we forget about them. And this is also goes to all of our poetry. We have huge history and long history of poetry in Iran, and in all of our philosophers and poets mentioned that we are the past people once been as alive as us, that now we're breathing. They've been here, and so this way of thinking helped me to think that, okay, nothing started from me, and nothing in this world didn't start from us, and will not finish after us. So they are here, they've been here in our memory, in their books, in our culture, even in our blood, so they exist. And so that's why they always coming and going in my stories, dead people, and I love them very much because they shape my character, they shape my characters, my story characters, and I think it's very much cultural. Yeah.
So the reality really is, it's almost like the past is present now.
Exactly.
Is that how the culture sort of sees it?
Yeah, it's very common that in our culture I grow and I wake up in the morning and I say, oh, Mom, I saw Dad last night and he begged for food. And my mom said, oh, he needs, you should, what you say in English? You should give food free to poor people. So this is the meaning of that. So your soul of your father will be happy. And we do this. It sounds funny, but it connects us with the past, with each other, connect us with our dreams. And, everything has meaning in our culture. Our names, our last names, what is the purpose of our life, why we're living in this world, everything has meaning in our culture. And so that's why we cannot forget them. They are very much alive.
I think I read or heard in one of the interviews you gave talking about facts, basing a story on facts, and you said something like, for me, facts are also emotions and dreams.
Yes, True.
And that's really what you're saying now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, facts is to me what I experience as a human. My dreams are facts to me because I saw that. Maybe you didn't saw, but I saw that. And so mythological stories are facts to me. You know, when I'm writing, I'm not journalist. Remember that. So when I'm journalist, I'm just journalist. And when I'm writer, I mix everything together. I see everything together. I cannot separate things from each other. And that's why my stories always have so many layers, mythological layers, poetical, philosophy, history, politics. Everything comes together and create a word to say how I see this word. So, and I always claim that there is not even one paragraph or maybe one page in my novels without factual ground. Always there are references to history, to politics, to culture, to literature, our poets, our philosophy, ancient stories. There are always some facts. Yeah.
And if I could sort of say to you too, Jayne, pick up sort of something similar in your writing. You're writing about that person in the past, perhaps all the details and the facts aren't quite correct, and that doesn't matter, but there's an emotional consistency in what you write. That the emotion is sort of perhaps more important than whether she went down that street or went to that bar or whether that event actually happened. You seem less concerned about getting the facts right and more concerned about the emotional strength or the emotional power of the novel, of the memoir.
Yeah, you know, Werner Herzog says this great thing about his, you know, he makes these documentaries and when they get boring, he just adds stuff in because he's like, if you want facts, you go get the Manhattan phone book. That's facts. What are you talking about? I mean, I went to this theatre school where we would go out every day. Well, we would go and do these projects where we would observe. It was all about observation. So you'd go out and you'd observe, and then you'd come back into the theatre, and you would perform. You'd create a performance out of this reality, and to come back and actually mimic what it is that you had seen or done or learned was boring, and it was not enough. You had to come back and create from this. You had to actually create. It was almost like to come back and simply perform what you'd seen wasn't truthful. It was boring. It was just this sort of mock-up. But what's the essence of what it is that you've seen? What's the reality? What's the truth? And I think that I've only realised that with finishing this third book is that I think that's what I'm trying to do with the books. Is it's not interesting to me to tell you, oh, and then this happened. What is interesting to me is to try and find the essence of that true experience that I've had. So it is factual. There's a lot about it. Like, I think this is why they've ended up in the non-fiction section, is because, say, the bizarre accident I had in Paris, that is not made up. Like, that's 100% true. And if you tried to put it in the fiction section, people would say, oh, it's so far-fetched, as if that would happen. So it is the truth, and it is. But in telling that truth, I've tried to find its essence. I'm more interested in that truth than I'm interested in the Manhattan phone book version of my story. We're making work. I'm making a story. I'm telling you, you know, like if I tell you the story of how I, you know, gave birth in Paris and how that eventuated, I'm not going to sort of just list the facts and make it really. I'm going to tell you the story of the feeling and the, you know, like my dead fact is alive. I make it alive. Maybe in a similar way to your ghosts, you know, like it's the fact is that they're dead and that, but they're not. You know, there's a way of conveying and bringing to life those solid, cold details, I suppose. And that's what my aim is. I just don't see the point otherwise of. I just don't find it interesting.
Yeah.
There is like I totally agree, there is this kind of idea that I really like. I think it comes from Henry James originally, that novels say, if we talk about fiction, they don't capture life, they complete life. So there's this idea that, life is actually really thin and we need to complete it by what we do. So writing fiction is how we fill out that thinness. Life isn't enough without creation because it is creation. So like you're saying, Shokoofeh, that realism, the old literary term of realism, so-called, which is a kind of result of materialism and industrialisation, because realism is, as you describe it, it's dream, it's the inner imagination, the inner eye. We're all walking around with that most of the time, and every night we go to bed and we dream for hours, and all the memory and stuff, all the invisible stuff, that's the stuff that, for, I suppose, people like us, you have to complete your life with for it to be full. Otherwise, it's just thin and not a very enriching thing. So, what you're describing, Jayne, is just like, that's what we do. That's what we do. We complete life by doing these things.
Yeah.
You've raised that sort of idea of the question of creativity and imagination, which is what we're talking about today. It seems like, imagination is not making up something that doesn't exist. Even perhaps, Rhett, in your case, it does exist to certain degrees. We're moving into that anyway. But imagination is more about going inside. I think other writers have said that. The Austrian poet Rilke said something about imagination is not inventing something that doesn't exist. It's about going inside and discovering what actually does exist, which I think is what is in all your books, really. I don't know whether anyone wants to comment on that. It's not made up stuff, it's finding what's inside, the emotion or the truth, the dream, whatever it is there. And you just have to go inside, and that's what writers are supposed to be doing, finding out that and letting us know about it.
Yeah, I always say that magic realism is not about concealing reality. It's not about hiding reality or escaping from the truth or reality. Magic realism is the way of looking in the different dimension of the reality. That's why I think magic realism doesn't come from just my imagination. It comes from my culture. It has roots in for thousands and thousands of years. It's not something that you can say, for example, Harry Potter is magical realism. It's not. Realism should be magic realism should come from a very deep and native culture. In the culture, we see different dimensions of reality in our dream, in our memory. Anytime that we think about a single memory, we change it. And every time it's true. And this is how we do this in our novels, in our works. We don't want to, I think what we are doing is not just representing reality, we are really reshaping reality. We play with reality, but we don't lie. Reality for the moment that I'm writing my story is exactly the things that I'm writing. But when people read it, for example, they say one of my characters, for example, if you read it, a girl when going to a school with her red umbrella, she suddenly lifted from the ground and she suspended in the air. So everyone thinks it's a lie, but this comes from my childhood memory. One day when I was going to middle school, which was 7 kilometers far from our house, I grew up in a village and we should walk from the rice fields. One of my village friends said, Shokoofeh, yesterday when I was raining and I was under the high volume electricity, what you call it, electricity station with my umbrella, I suddenly felt I lifted and I was suspended in the air. So she lied or she exaggerated, but she felt that. But it's come from my memory. And I use it in my story in the way that I think it suits for my story. So I think, reality exists outside of us, but it still is also living inside of us. Yeah.
I'll jump to you, Rhett, sort of because you're... the idea of people becoming trees might seem sort of quite outrageous, but it's a metaphor for something. And it seems to me like you're also alerting us to a world that we're part of now. The sort of you show that sort of world of depersonalisation of work and people struggling to sort of be heard and to be themselves, and sort of moving into something like that. And with AI and algorithms, I mean, we're partly there, aren't we? Really. So it's not so extraordinary, really, what you're saying.
I mean, it becomes very real in the book, I suppose. I think that's the what you're sort of saying there. I mean, and look, I think for me, I was talking about it being a bit about grief, and what I mean by that is more a grief about lots of different things. So, a sense of climate grief is I think a pretty ubiquitous kind of idea at the moment. The sense that we don't have a world to look forward to is an awful, awful thing, and it has happened in my lifetime that a lot of us feel that way. But not just that, it's about loss of family members and so forth as well. And I'm just going to distract back to Shokoofeh's kind of comment there too. I think what I try and do is a little bit is abstract reality a little bit to help understand what my reality is, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of, for example, there is a passage in this book that is about Bren's mother, and that directly comes from my own mother's death, really, sort of about 20 years ago. And I couldn't write about that at all. I mean, I've tried. I've done a very bad job of it, and any sort of non-fiction version of that for me was just not interesting and not good. But the first time that I could actually do it, I'm not going to spoil what actually happens, but this abstraction of people turning into trees helped me get there, and helped me get to an emotional truth that I didn't expect when I started writing it. To be honest, it really took me by surprise that I thought I would end up there, but I did. And so that I think for me is it's almost like going against the notion of pure reality. The idea, and I've always found that idea of realism generally to be quite constraining and honestly a bit of a lie, if that makes sense. Realism is not actually possible in fiction. It is made up of memory. It is made up of strange things that may or may not have happened, right? I've sort of moved away from that, I suppose. But I don't know if I answered your question there, John, but I went on and I did it my own, if that's okay.
Well, what it does make me sort of jump to is Arborescence, really, just following on from Shokoofeh too, it's got an emotional strength to it, because I mean, there's relationships in there are really the main part of the story. You might have people turning into trees, but there's a very good, Bren and Kaylin, they have a good relationship, and Bren has an incredible relationship with his mother, with the friend that's disappeared. There's sort of an emotional strength at the centre of the story, I think.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think, look, for me, I'm talking about a lot about grief and all that sort of stuff, but I wanted it to be a hopeful sort of book, and I wanted to have people who are really, and Bren and Kaylin are very close to each other. They're deeply in love at the start of the book, right? Yeah. They have their ups and downs, but like anyone. But I didn't really want it to be a traditional sort of, an idea of, doomed romance or whatever like that. I found it kind of more interesting to do a fairly stable bunch of people who are kind of dealing with an unstable world, which is not dissimilar to the whole idea of hovering in some ways too. But and they obviously encounter these things together, but they're very supportive of each other, I suppose.
Indeed, yeah, very.
Can I interject? Oh, sorry. Can I just interject and say something that just occurred to me? I just realised this wonderful thing. Like in writing, you're so often pigeonholed, magic realism, non-fiction, fiction, poetry, whatever. And I just had this realisation that we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to use these forms to try and communicate or to dig into some human truth and bring it to the surface. And that was just a really nice feeling.
I'm reading your 4 books, that seem so different, but by the end, you're all sort of struggling with the same ideas and the same truths, and trying to sort of find a way through them all, I think. Yeah, Greg?
I'd like to just adjust that thought a little bit and say, I don't think we're trying to do it. And I don't think we're struggling to do it. I think it's what humans do. It's life coming through us. I remember seeing, I was in Ireland and seeing this old guy who was quite a famous fiddler in this village, and someone said to him, so what happens when you make up a tune? And he said something like, and excuse the accent, he said, well, I'm walking up the road and I saw the bird and so I took out the fiddle. Like, there's not a trying or it's instinctive and elemental, and it's almost sad that we even have to explain. This is what we do. We're all narrative animals. And we just got to let ourselves be that, I think. Yeah?
Yeah.
Love it.
That's how I feel, yeah.
Yeah.
Were you going to add something, Shokoofeh, before?
No,
Okay.
agree. Yeah, totally
And it's not people up here and people down there being different. We're just all the same.
Yeah.
It's just our life circumstances have fallen a particular way that means that we've written these books, but we're all narrative animals. Yeah.
Greg, while you've got the microphone, I wonder if you'd like to read one of your poems for us?
Oh, sure.
Please.
This poem is a narrative. Sometimes poetry is hard to read to an audience if it's not narrative, because it's hard. I know myself sitting in an audience to, poems written for the page are written for the page in a sense, and you need to spend time with them in solitude. So this one's a story as much as it is a poem. And yeah, sure. 103. It's called Restoring an Ancient Metaphor to My Dreams, and it's basically a story about when I first bought heritage chooks as opposed to, battery hens and things like that when my kids were little. So it's just a local story, but it says something for me about how absurd we are and also how we're completely always connected to the old stories. Restoring an ancient metaphor to my dreams, I travelled far and wide for the heritage breeds, not knowing exactly what I was doing, but sensing we needed something more wholesome than anything genetic engineering can provide. On returning home, I felt the link over several days between the making of a poem and the construction of a building, in this case a chook house, strung and patterned in recognition of the nightly fox of truth, who lives unbound from children's picture books in a warm poem den of its own making in the dune hummock south of town. This chook house and run was to be the new home of 2 hens from Barongarook, 2 from Winchelsea, and 2 from Geelong. And as they settled in, we watched a pecking order revive from where it had languished in euphemism. We saw how it was the opposite of that, how it hurt and therefore held true meaning. For months then, we were dreaming of the omelettes to come, the frittatas and the yolk-dipped soldiers of toast. But winter's heath-lit chill had descended upon us, the sun tickling the hill lines. It slung its ammunition low across the sky. And in an otherwise hushed darkness, we rose with the magpie every morning to find 6 hens still sleeping in their hay. Then, nearing the end of the local footy season, the light began to come back and lengthen the day. Our old dogs still slept, but the hens grew hungry earlier now. They gathered at dawn's door like supporters clamouring for finals tickets. Even the new buds on the nearby peach tree seemed to be barracking for the eggs. The game was on. The hens preened and shone, hassled us for grain, they clawed the ground for insects, slurped up their rainwater and sat blinking in the warming gold of the wattle spring which brewed in the canopy over their run. Even the old man eucalypt seemed to be asking us to set the festive billy on the fire of fun. The song of warmer nights felt as close now as the sound of the sea. And yet they did not lay. We held discussions with sardonic farmer friends, feeling about as green as our slushy river flat, though nowhere near as resplendent. We began to suspect that, yes, we'd been too puritanical in rejecting the ecumenical acronym of Isa Browns. Cheeky uncles licked their lips too at the prospect of a locavore poultry banquet, necked chooks coming their way at Christmas time. It got to the stage that I'd almost forgotten what we were hoping for. Our heritage breeds had become not so much pets as the clucking soundtrack of a lack of inspiration. Then one morning, as I went out to vinegar their water, a clean and curving arc of shell beamed up at me, the sunlit face of a new planet in the leaf litter. In the following days, we took our turns to taste the nectar of daily heart-rich yolk. To me, it tasted something like the faith we should always keep in even the most ephemeral of creeks. One night too, during that first euphoric week, I dreamt I went fox-like in the leafy moonlit run. All around me a soft lunar light fell on precisely what is symbolised by the sun. Eggs. Eggs in all kinds of shapes, colours and sizes. Each shell was a house for a new world, a new universe. Each universe had a different beginning, some rich, some outrageously so, and everyone a sort of poem. I woke from the dream knowing that something very old had hatched within me, an ancient consciousness, in fact, of visions appearing, apparitions of natural wealth, such simple yet nourishing things. Human beings had been dreaming this since the world began. In my veins, I felt the old, dry creek beds running, returning to full spate, and somewhere in the nearly forgotten and outermost parts of my being, stars swirled through a night sky shaped in the perfected yet slightly unlikely form of an egg.
Thank you, Greg. Hearing you read that poem reminds me that all your books have humour in them. I found myself laughing out loud at some point in the whole 4 books. I don't know if I was supposed to, Shokoofeh, but I did. There's humour in your book, isn't there?
Yes. If it is a question I should answer,
If
it's
you
okay.
If you want to.
So yeah, it's life, right? You know, it's life. Life is not like that. Oh, everything is dark. Everything is bad. I should suicide. No, we laugh. We make joke. We make joke of our mistakes. We make joke, especially Iranian make joke of the regime a lot. And when you go to Iran, horrible things happen, and people make joke of them. Because this is kind of, you know, I think self-protection, you know, the way that we think that, okay, life is continue, okay, don't give up. You can take, you know, you can make jokes. So yeah, in my stories also, I use lots of humors, and in our culture, we believe that always after the dark is a dawn. So always morning coming, don't give up. So this kind of thinkings and thoughts comes through our culture, and that's why and as I said, it's mix of life is mix of everything. Happiness is mix of everything to me. Yeah.
And both your books too, Jayne and Rhett, you have that sort of humour. They're funny. They laugh out loud in places, really, aren't they?
Oh, that's good. I never know what you're going to laugh, what anyone's going to laugh at. It's usually the places you don't intend it.
Sometimes you think you shouldn't, but you know, you find yourself laughing.
We sort of hope you do, but you know, whether you do is another question.
Now, I've got loads of questions still. I thought I'd run out of questions, but in a few minutes it's going to be your turn. Anyone wants to ask a question. But I'm sort of still, you know, there's lots of sort of unanswered questions, I think, too. Jayne, if we can just come to something you said, quote from one of your stories, which I think is interesting, talking about time and looking back on time. You said, if I can write my time here on the streets as things were, then perhaps I can keep it forever. Is that sort of a bit similar really to what Shokoofeh is saying, you know, that remembering the past and talking about the past does make it present really in some way?
Yeah, I think a lot
but
of
time falls away, and you know, there's a timelessness about stories.
Yeah, and I think so much about writing. I know for me, I write to keep something. And I remember when I was in that situation in Paris at that particular time as a young student, I knew it was a short-lived thing, and I knew I wanted to somehow bottle it. And I think I'm actually quite nostalgic. I'm a bit like my dad, who's here today. He used to take photos of everything. I have that. I've inherited that desire to keep something like a little nest, and it's driving me crazy. Actually, I read a quote the other day by someone. I feel like it was Anne Sexton or someone, but I'm probably misattributing that to her. But she said something about it's about for her anyway. It was about writing in order to relive. Does anyone remember who said that thing about writing in order to... Okay, sorry. Come on. Come on, Gregory, Dave.
Greg knows.
I'll find it and I'll send it to everyone. But it's a desire to sort of capture time, to sort of dominate time in some way, and to create a little nut that you can sort of...
Robert Loud, the American poet, did say something very similar. He said a poem, but take it as any piece of writing, is an event, not the record of an event. I always like that.
Oh, the poem is an event itself.
Like you were saying before, it's not mimicking something that happened. It is something.
Yes.
It's not. It's an event itself.
So,
the way you experience it is going to change all constantly as well, with the way that you grow and change. And I love the idea of, like, it's almost like trying to defy death in lots of ways, isn't it? Because this object that you've made, a book or a poem or a artwork of some kind, or a photo, that's going to live beyond you, and that's a very satisfying feeling for a nostalgic person who wants to live forever.
now, I've got a final question that I'd really like. Well, I've got some other questions, but this one I really wanted to know, perhaps Jayne, because you've just been speaking, why is it that you write, do you think?
That might be the reason, actually, just to keep hold of something, or to try. I find it such an interesting and fun challenge to try and be satisfied, not that I ever am, but just to find... I love to work with words. I like to try and find ways of making a sentence capture something. I don't. It's a hard question. I write. It's almost like you're saying, Gregory. Like it. I just like the moments happen, and it's just the natural thing to do. It's If I actually just on that as well. Like I think I never really set out to write. I actually just knew I wanted to create. I suppose I always thought I wanted to do theatre and be an actor. And when I first had these stories, I remember thinking, well, if they were a film or if they were a poem or if they were, that's what they would be. But they just happen to be long stories that lend themselves to a novel or a memoir or whatever, that long form. So strap in. I better see if I can do that. But it was never a desire to do the actual thing. It was more the story.
Probably have preferred to be a painter, really.
Yes.
I mean, it could just be like...
Yes.
Well, basically, I think for me, that's the idea that I want that stuff out. All the stuff that's going in, spinning around and all that stuff, whatever medium is the easiest. Well, I wouldn't say it's easy, but whatever medium is the most appropriate is the way it just needs to get out of there, though. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but that's kind of why I would say that there's too much stuff going on in here that needs to just... And it's how you then... I think when you actually look at what you've done, in whatever way, in a writing sense, you start to understand what you actually understand.
Is that why you write then? Because I
think so.
It's for you the way that it expresses itself.
Yeah, and also it's a bit of an entertainment for me as well. It's trying to sort of, there's jokes and things in there that I'm attempting. So it's a little bit of actually trying to sort of keep myself from being bored or something. That's a really reductive way of looking at writing, but I'm going to stick with it.
So you've sort of answered the question, I think, really. Yeah. So are you working on something new, Rhett?
I am.
Pretty harsh. It came out like 5 seconds ago.
Come on.
I am, yes. It's just very early days, though, John. We'll yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Don't break the magic. Greg, can I get you to answer that question about why you, with such a broad range of books that you've written now, you still something to write, something to say?
Oh, God. Yeah, no, I couldn't live without it, whether it be making music or...
Well, of course, we didn't get onto your at you as a musician, you know, which comes out in your poems, of course, too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all connected for me. I mean, I would say a bit like that Irish fiddler I was talking about. At the moment, you know, the magpies, the Parawong at home, they go into this nesting tune cycle before dawn, just in kind of late July every year, and it goes for 6 weeks while they're building their nest. So before the hour before dawn every morning, I'm listening to that to loop, like a Philip Glass loop. It goes, and it's the relationship between the new light and the song that is happening at that point. That's, to me, that's a reminder every morning that actually it's as elemental and as instinctive as that. So the why of it, it's just like that.
Yeah. Thank you, thanks. Shokoofeh, can I ask you that question too, just to finish with?
Yes, actually, I think I'm writing because I cannot not writing. That's the main idea for me. I cannot stop myself from writing, and I cannot resist so many imagination and ideas, just keeping them there. They should come out and then leave me alone. That's the main reason that I'm writing. And another reason is that I feel responsibility, especially since I'm in Australia and I have freedom of writing, and also I feel exiled and, you know, far from my home. And I feel kind of personal and social responsibility to write down, to give life to things that deliberately removed from our lives and our culture, and also revealing lots of truths about the regime that they always try to conceal it, to just hide it. So there are, in many different levels, I cannot stop writing.
Thank you, Shokoofeh. Well, we're glad you can't, really.
Thanks.
I do have lots more questions, but there's a chance now for people in the audience, if you want to ask a question. Lady here, if you just wait till you get the microphone, please.
I'm doing a small course online that is to do with the query letter, and the big message that comes through from this New York woman is absolutely make sure you know what your genre is, and that you need to go to a bookshop or a library and be able to work it out. And I know that before you, Jayne in particular, were talking about
I can see the faces.
It seems that all of you are
already.
sort of, you don't have a particular genre, and I mean, I like that personally. I like the fact that things are cross-genre. But what would you say about that?
I can see the resistance going on already.
Don't listen to me, because I remember the first agent I spoke to, she said, is it memoir or is it fiction? You need to know. I don't know. And I mean, I run a bookshop. So I know the daily thing of like, okay, tell us, you're experiencing, there's 1,000 books a week released into Australia, it's insanity. So it does help to be categorised and to be categorisable. But, it's all of our books that are completely different and unique. They're literature. Actually, in France, I've just come back from France, and I really get excited because my style of book, my style of writing is something known in France as just simply literature. It's literature. It's essay, fiction. It's exploration of an idea. So it's really hard. I'm definitely the wrong person to ask, because I think I understand why they want to know specifically what it is you're doing, and if you're clear in your mind about what it is. But if you're not clear, I wish and I hope that changes that rigidity over time, because it's what part of the pleasure of being a bookseller is being in the shop and going, I don't know where to put this, and then someone puts it back in fiction and you're like, no, it's categorised under frickin' memoir, put it back there. It's not meant to be a precise science. And it makes me sad, the thought of people like yourself, or, to be agonising over this idea, when that is what makes it so fun, is that it doesn't fit. It's not a fitting type thing. Otherwise we just end up with genre, anyway. So definitely ask someone more. Can anyone else answer that for me? That's Greg probably has a great, having been, and having written so widely and over so many different forms, and being in the industry for a lot longer than me.
I used to work at Bowen Booksellers here in Geelong for many years. Legendary shop. I used to say to people when they were talking about Murakami, they say, have you read Murakami? I say, yeah. They say, what's Murakami? How do you know, I say, oh, Murakami's like Coca-Cola. Perfect. You know, a couple of times a year, that's exactly what you want, and nothing else, and it's just magic. But don't do too much of it, you know, because that's what I feel about genre. Like, I love Georges Simenon, the French crime writer. Oh, there's just 3 or 4 times a year when all I want to read is Georges Simenon because it's genre. You know, it's like Coke. So I don't know, you know.
Can
Yeah,
I
do you know what I
give
mean?
you some answer to? Yeah, I teach writing to Iranian students too, and always I believe, and I say to them that you need to learn all the basics. You need to know the elements of story writing, and also you need to know the genres, you know, the styles, everything. You should know them to one day be able to cross them. That's my point. You should, and always give example of Picasso. Picasso was amazing painter of classical painting until one day he was so master of classical painting that he crossed it and changed it and made Cubism. You know, so many, you know, you should be master of something and then you can leave it alone and do something else and break it, change it, rename it, do whatever you want. And I believe that this style of magic realism that I'm working, I don't see any previous writer writing like that. I am deeply in politics and social justice in my magical realism way that I don't see it in Murakami, I don't see in Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I don't see in another magic realism writers. So we should be master of something, and then we are able to break it, change it, rename it, whatever we can do. Yeah.
Can I just add one little thing? Because, sorry, I just realised that your question is really specific and the query letter is very specific. I would say just pick one and then later on you can, you know, does that answer the question? Because you're submitting work, is that the...
I think it might also, I don't know if this is true, it might also be to do with the actual editor or publishing house that you're approaching, because on their bios they sometimes say that they like cross-genre stories and so on. Yeah. So maybe that would be okay.
Just a tiny little anecdote. When I first wrote Paris or Die, well, before it became Paris or Die, I was approached by a publisher at a forum like this. It was a discussion. And she said, are you writing about Paris? Because your stories are interesting. And I said, well, yeah, I've been working on 3 novels, actually, for a long time. And she said, oh, we publish non-fiction. And I said, it's non-fiction.
Rhett, did you want to add something to that?
Be adaptable, I guess. Yeah. No, I mean, I struggle with it a little bit too. I mean, I'm put into the literary fiction space, and I'm not really sure if that's always the right category, if there is a category for me. I mean, my main, and I don't think this is true of all fiction. I think there are clear sort of, in crime fiction, you're going to write to a specific kind of type of audience, and it's got a certain sort of set of ideas behind it. But for me, that's not what I'm doing. I will write and then work out what the hell I'm doing with it afterwards. And the publishers, if they want it, can say what the hell it is. I don't really know. Now that is probably a less commercially viable version of that. I think you probably, if you are looking at other real genre sort of stuff, crime and other sort of things, then there's a different kind of things you've got, and you have to be aware of it in that case, and you have to be writing towards that for sure.
Yeah, and don't publishers, I mean, they want to market, don't they? So they want to know how to market it. And some people write for a market, and that's fine, probably very successfully too. But it looks like the rest of us are just sort of doing what we do and hoping it'll hit a genre somewhere. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, the lady down back there.
On a similar theme, you're all artists, you're creating, you've got something you want to deliver. I'm not a writer, I'm a reader. So the finished package, obviously you get the enjoyment out of the creation, but you also hope it'll go on the shelf and it'll be read. I'm curious about, a little bit about cover art, but mostly the blurb. Having all that work and those ideas condensed down to this is what people see, this is how they decide. Do they pick your book up or do they move further up the shelf?
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, the blurb.
Great question.
Yeah, very good
What's the
question.
question? Sorry.
Do you mind just repeating a little bit the main part of the question? Perhaps
Yeah.
So
we got a bit
the guts
lost.
of the question is the blurb. Does it drive you crazy? Who writes it? Do you write it? Does somebody else? Does it?
You look
do
for
you look at your
friends.
blurb and think, why is my all of those years and that time condensed to that little bit? And are people going to get me based on that, or are they going to walk away and
It's
choose?
incredibly painful, and I rewrite it, basically. There's my answer to that. I get given one and I go, no, thanks. I'll do that again. Not quite true. They do their best, I think, to do justice, but it's always a bit of tweaking involved to get it right. Is it ever right? No, I hate it.
It's a bit like talking about your book in lots of ways, because it's you're the best person to do that, but it's the hardest thing you can possibly do. So I tend to write it and then I give it back to them and say, please change it. And then they don't. And then they give it back to me and they say, yeah, no, we haven't changed anything. And I go, and then I rework it. And then I show it to say, it's really, really hard. Yeah. Do you write your own or do they write?
No, I think the publisher sent book to some, critics. To me, it is my experience to critics, and then they write something for my book, and it's commercial things, and I think readers shouldn't judge the book with the blurbs. Yeah.
What about you? Do you write your own or do they write yours?
It's a collaboration mainly, between the publisher and me, but yeah, it's crazy. Like, I don't know, you just got to, we're all, in all our working lives, we're doing things we're not quite completely comfortable with. This is the thing. And because it's a commercial world, I mean, otherwise we'd just put it in the drawer at home. So putting it out there. But there is an art to it, like everything. There is a kind of crisp, kind of minimal, sending out the right signal, the core signal to the type of reader who might like what you do. Make sure that if that type of reader picks it up, they don't think it's something else. Yeah.
Isn't it sometimes just bribing or threatening friends? It's the quickest way to do it.
There's two things we're talking about here as well, which is the blurb, which I think that the lady who's mentioned, which is the description of the book. That's like, this is a story about blah blah blah, and then you've got the blurbs, which is the other writers and people, endorsements, which we are often called blurbs. This is the best thing I've ever written, and.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Yeah, just on the end there.
Sorry, I can't take the mask off. Hope, can you hear me? That's all right. Yeah. A book's published, but there's a period before.
Can you hold it a little bit closer?
Right, okay.
Like that.
There? Yeah? Yeah. I'm interested in the process of the editing of books, because that's absolutely crucial for any writer. And just what your experience of working with editors has been.
I'm a selfish one. I never let anyone touch my writings. So
Really?
I don't have editor. Yeah, I don't let them. That's why it takes years and years to work. So 6 years took me to finish this book, and I read it and I edited million times. And I think no one is better than me to edit my work, because I'm very brutal when I want to remove from my story. Brutally, I remove a story, they take it out, and I said, don't worry, you will fit it in another story, wave it with another story, another book. So I never let them touch it. Sorry.
Amazing.
I know people say I'm very selfish, and yes.
No, I'm
Admirable.
very admiring of
Well
that.
done.
I'm desperate for help. As soon as I can get it in front of an editor, I'm like, please have a look at it, tell me what I'm doing wrong, please.
You worked with the same editor on both your books?
No, a couple of different ones actually. Look, I find the editing process really quite joyful actually, and it's a different thing, I suppose. But it's not that you lose control for me. It's more there are times. This edit was a tough one for Arborescence. She was very much challenging me on quite a few things, but I find the overall experience really quite elevating because they are really ultimately there to make the book better, and they're quite amazing. It's an amazing profession, an amazing skill. I've got no idea really how how really good editors do it. It's something that's kind of magical to me. They can pick up inconsistencies from page 3 and all the way through that you've just not tracked. So I find it brilliant. I find it very enjoyable, really, to go through really good edits. Yeah.
Have you always worked with the same editor?
Not always, no, but I do. I often think about editing as I also kind of work a bit as an editor too, but I think of it. Editing is such a gift, a vocation, creative act, but it's also like fruit. You know, like you go into the supermarket and there's the apple that's been sprayed with the sticker on it, and it has no flavour. And then you go into the organic shop or you pick it off your tree and there's the apple which has got blemishes and you bite into it and it actually tastes like something. So there are editorial processes that are trying to make that apple with the sticker on it, which, very kind of sensitive to that. But then there's the reader who's trying to grow the fruit with the flavour that you want. And that's the go.
But lovely metaphor, Greg. I think perhaps that's where we need to leave the discussion. Look, I think I'm speaking on behalf of you all this afternoon to say what a wonderful afternoon of discussion. I loved the 4 books, and now that I've properly met the writers, I love the writers too. So please thank them for a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. And I'd like to say too that John's a poet. He hasn't mentioned that. A very fine poet. So his books are there for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Now, all the writers will be going downstairs to the pop-up bookshop, the Demick's bookshop. So if you rush down there quickly and buy their books, they'll be available for signing. So thanks very much, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you next year.